What?
You should leave your shorts on.
Great. Tedious. That's good to see.
Good morning, everyone. It is September 8th, 2025. It is our 9 o'clock strategic planning meeting for the Board of County Commissioners. Let the record reflect that we currently have 3 commissioners that are present. So we do have a quorum. We have Commissioner Kearns, Commissioner Jordan, and myself. We are anticipating the other commissioners may be joining by Zoom. So you'll see them. Oh, Commissioner Waldorf has just joined.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome. So we will go ahead and get started with, it looks like we have a full lineup. So Jeff, I'm going to start with you to lead it off and introduce who's all coming today.
So we'll go through 4 budgets this morning. Risk is here, ready to go, followed by the medical fund, HR, and then actually, I guess, also health district and medical center. So five budgets this morning. Any feedback or decisions you can make in real time, so we can add to our list. If you want to work later in the process to prioritize. I'd say this morning, some of our probably easier budgets to solve on, but there will be a couple asks coming your way. I think legitimate ones that you'll just need to make a decision on today or later in the process.
And I'm going to be that commissioner that's going to go, okay, show me where I need to go.
Should just keep scrolling down and it should give you all of your touchscreen. It should all be right here in order.
Okay.
You don't have a copy of this one?
Yes, I don't need my budget folder.
We only did electronic budget folders. I brought myself hard copies. I'm more than happy to share.
Perfect. Okay. Yes, I am that commissioner. Like I'm too focused on.
Well, that's me, and I like to take notes on paper when you guys
say the county, and so I'm a little behind on.
Okay, I am my folder. I have a Ron in your folder. Find it.
They need Brenda to copy that for me. So thanks for doing that, Ron. So welcome this morning.
All right. Well, good morning. Thank you, commissioners, for your time. I have Ben Harriseth here. I think most of you all know who Ben is as our security manager for the county. So he's here to answer any questions that might come up in that regard. And then most of you may not know who Brandy is. She's sitting here. She's been with the county almost 17 years and all with risk management. And she is the one behind the scenes that keeps us on budget. So she's got the history and knows where those numbers come from if those questions come up. So I've been asked to present to you regarding court security and county security. Even though these kind of fall under one budget, they are 2 separate accounts. And so we are required by the auditors to keep them separate. And so we have to run them as 2 separate accounts. So I'll run through this presentation, and then the last 2 pages that are attached to the handouts that I gave you kind of break out. The first page breaks the 2 budgets out so you can see where the money's going and where the ask is for. And then the last page just gives you some statistics on the screening processes and what they do. So if we go to that first page under court security, court security is a separate account, and it was set up specifically to address the needs and the requirements of the RCW and Washington State Courthouse Public Safety Standards. This budget provides for one sheriff's deputy and the screening services through contract security, that's PPC, and the state required annual inspection and licensing of the X-ray machines. So for us to have those machines, they are required to be inspected every year, and that inspection allows us to obtain the required license to have that. What this budget does not account for or provide, it does not provide for any program maintenance, any maintenance to the machines, anything that breaks, and it does not account for any cost of risk management staff salaries to operate this program. So it is literally just a standalone account to just handle the required screening services for our court facilities. The dollar amounts that you see there in 2025, you can see what the approved budget dollar amounts were. And then in 2026, you can see what we're asking for. There's some reductions in there, like the court deputy. There's a 3.4% reduction in that. We were able to get collaboration with the Sheriff's Department. They've taken on some of the expenditures that we used to have to pay for out of this, like the vehicle. They're taking that on. They're taking the phone on. But other than that, everything else is just the deputy. And then I think their uniforms in there. But outside of that, there's no other expenditures. So the sheriff's office is taking that on. Screening services is where our big increase is. As you guys all know, we have the new retail tax that is hitting us in October 1 of this year. And that's 9.1% that gets tacked on to this bill, which is an enormous amount of money. It's somewhere around $60,000 additional to the just the contracted hours. And then we have PPC that they're asking for a 3% increase into their contract. Now, last year we did not give them an increase due to budget constraints, and just there was some budgeting errors in there regarding we had some wrong numbers that were originally given to us for contract hours. There was some improper billing. We took care of all of that, but we basically did not give them an increase last year, but they are asking for that 3% this year. If you look at the inspection and licensing, that stayed the same. So overall, it's a 5.7% increase to the court security budget. It is a $60,000 increase is what we're asking for. But we'll show you how we've offset almost half of that with the county security budget. If you go to the next slide, it talks about the benefits. I don't think most people understand or realize that they do screen. Our screening stations screen over 617,000 individuals in a year. That's more people. That's almost more people than in the county itself. Ben can tell you from across the river at our federal courthouse, they don't even come close to these numbers. We screen a lot of people. You can see the breakout there as far as the amount of people screened in a year by the court facility. In the main courthouse and court annex, obviously that's the only facility that we technically have 2 screening services at. But these are huge amounts of people that come through there. That they just quietly do their job. Current staffing levels allow for safe screening. They last year removed over 10,000 restricted items and did not allow those to enter those facilities or into the courtrooms. So they do a lot of service quietly that we don't necessarily notice or see. And we get that with the pay that we're giving them for the quality of officers and service that we're expecting. So these are enormous numbers. When you get to the options in service, I don't know exactly what's on the digital binder because there were some last minute numbers and stuff. But some options to offset these costs. One would be to just not give them the 3%, and that's about a $28,000 reduction, which is an option. But I fret to see that with the service that they provide and the fact that we gave them no increase last year. They want to continue to provide the same quality of guards and service that we get. Option 2 through 5, really, those are kind of just thrown out there as numbers if we were to reduce services. But I would like to point out that option 2 would apply to the Broadway Center building. If we were to remove court services and not have a courtroom in there, you could reduce this contract with no penalties by roughly that amount of money. That's $74,000. If you were to look at option 4, which is closing an entire screening station down, which would be the precinct, the Valley Precinct, would be an example of that. That would be the amount of money that could be saved in a year over the lifetime of that contract. So just to give you some ideas, because I know that there's talks, continued talks about vacating the Broadway Center building altogether and things like that, but it does give you some dollar amounts to see what those effects would be on the contract and how to reduce that. If we go to the next slide, anybody have any questions on the court security? Yeah.
Is the 3% increase contractual, or if we don't want to do that, does that impact the contract that we have? What is that?
So every year they have a right to ask. It's in the contract if they're going to ask for an increase. They're supposed to ask that by like October, but we have been advising them to please ask us by June, July for budget reasons. But there is no effect to the contract. There's no penalty to that. If we were to not, we could say no to the addendum that they request. It's just we would go, this would be the second year of giving them no increase. And last year they asked for a 4 and we said no. This year they're asking for a 3. They recognize the tax. They're trying to help out counties as best as possible. One thing to just mention on the tax, there is a portion in there that allows that tax to be set aside until April 1 of 2026 if there are no changes to the contract as of October 1 of 2025. So if you have no changes to the contract, you can go all the way to April 26 and set aside that tax until that tax goes into effect, as long as there are no changes. So the only part of the court security that I would ask is if we are considering giving them that 3%, we would want to sign that agreement before October 1, because then it locks that price in, but we don't see a tax, which is roughly a saving between 25 and 26 of almost $10,000. We would see a savings in our contract between that time of April before it hit in April. So there is some money savings by saying yes or agreeing or not agreeing. You could say no to the 3%, and it would still, the tax would not take effect until then. But if we're thinking about giving that 3, we would need to do it before October 1 of this year. Moving on to the county security. County security budget's responsible, or the account is responsible for everything else. So this is all of our access control. This is all of our cameras. This is Camtech's contract. That basically encompasses everything else. It provides 100% of the security manager's salary and benefits. It does pay 10% of one of HR staff and 5% of Brandy's time spent with the budget, bills, all those types of things. Also, card production is in there. We make a lot of cards, as you can imagine, through the year, not only for our own employees, but all the vendors, contractors, So we are going through a lot of that. Camtex maintenance contract and professional services, and then new equipment and repair and maintenance. And this is that line item that we have to take from county security to provide for any maintenance issues in court security, because court security does not have a line item to pay for any problems with our screening equipment or anything like that. And just FYI, with the court security, we do have one of our x-rays machines that is leaking fluid. And it's very, very slow leak. But according to the individuals of maintenance, that it is a non-repairable item. It is the heart of the system. And once that fluid gets low enough, it will short that system out. And that is a $20,000 fix. So it's
lubricant.
Yeah, it's lubricant in the system.
Or anyone thinks that it's toxic.
Yeah, no, it's not toxic. It's not radioactive. But once that gets low enough, it will short the system out. That's a $20,000 fix.
That's when we think we have found a solve on. If you guys are willing, the public works windows came in at roughly half what they were expected to. There's over 100,000 left there, and I think we could use some of that this year to cover this expense, so it'd be ready to go going forward. We don't really need any sort of vote on that if it's where it is, but that was something we were planning on doing unless there's disagreement.
Just so back on the budget, 2025, you can see the approved budget line items in there. And then in 2026, you can see where we have reduced the county security as much as possible, what we feel safe to do so to counter the 60,000 ask in court security. We've reduced county security by about 31,000, a little more than 31,000 for 2026. So if you look at there's no more slides, but in your handout, this first sheet here kind of separates the two budgets. So you can actually see how the money is broken out between the two budgets. You have court security and county security. And you can see for 2026, for court security, the actual ask is $28,511. That's that offset of the $31,000 from county security, and no additional asks with county security. And then very last page is just the statistics that shows the screening services and how that operates.
I would point out with their large sales tax that they're having to absorb in addition to a flat budget, they have done a very good job. Even though there was a modest ask here, they have a larger nut than most because of that tax component.
On the county security salary and benefits, 21% savings. What is that from?
One is for me. I originally had 10% of my salary was in court security or county security. These guys do a great job. I don't need to be in there. We're gonna suck it up where we need to anyways. So that went to liability. My salary is broken out between workers' comps and liability, so that was easy to put into those two budgets and see no effect in those. So that was the big part of taking it out.
I would suspect that when district court comes in, they have a gap they have to cover, and one of their proposals may be to close the traffic court out in the valley. Don't know, but by doing so, that directly solves on this, and then solves on some rent for them. So this would probably be one that may not want to take direction on today because it might resolve on its own.
District court will be in 2 weeks.
Okay, so. And obviously that's in my district, so it's like the, you know, so what they see in that court is misdemeanors though.
I believe so. Yeah, it's district court. Yeah, so it'd be this. I think it's.
Lot
I
of it's
think
traffic.
it's traffic. I think it's only traffic.
A lot of it to do the valley.
I would presume. No. I think it's all traffic.
It's all traffic, even if you're coming to the West Plains, you
Yep.
go.
All traffic court.
You drive a bit further, but you get free parking.
Yeah.
So I think that would be part of the discussion. I mean, because I guess I don't know. I'm assuming it was the valley residents that are using that, but if it's countywide.
Countywide. Yeah. That's what our understanding is.
I didn't realize that.
That's my understanding also. We can confirm with district court when they're here.
So just to clarify, you're saying if they did that, that would save further here.
Yeah.
That
What's
would be
about
that-
150?
Okay.
Yeah, if you look at the options under court security.
Any single screening station would be about
Yeah.
50.
So option 4 is essentially what you would be doing out in the valley, is removing an entire screening station. So, and those numbers don't include the tax. So you would be saving on the tax side too. Those numbers are just strictly
So option 4, which says annex,
yeah.
is actually valley. That's a typo.
Hi, Commissioner Walker.
So, but would there be an additional cost though to find a space? If you were to, and we'll discuss it, that traffic court out in the valley, you'd have to find a space here in the campus though for those court hearings to occur, correct?
They would have to find a space. They'd have to utilize a space. Whether they could utilize an existing space would have to be something they address, district court. Yeah.
Okay.
Sean Wither is watching. He just said they are not planning on leaving the valley precinct.
Oh.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Figures that out.
Well, it's just, I guess that leaves us back to that 28,511 covered the court security portion, which is the basically the 3% ask that the contractors asking.
So Dan, is the 60,000 on this slide, is that 3% and sales taxes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But then it's offset by the county security reduction of the 30. So that's how we come up.
I see.
That's how we come up with today's to 20.
Yeah, after 28,511. Once they make decisions now, they can combine them and make them later. Into a big ask, it makes sense to wait to see what priorities are for the smaller ones. If you want to make them in real time, anything that's a 5-digit number is going to be on the smaller side, but that's the board's.
But we'd also have to make that decision, because that's assuming the 3% before the 1st of October.
Yeah, because if you do move forward with a yes, we would need that before October 1 so that we can sign that addendum, and then it curbs that 9.1% tax on this contract until April 1, 2026.
Mr. Waldron?
Is it in our best interest to keep this contract year to year? It's an annual contract, right, with the security staff?
Yeah, it's a 5-year contract, so we are in the 3rd year of this contract. So
I was just thinking maybe we could compromise or negotiate for the next 2 years of the contract, maybe 3% over 2 years, or maybe a 2%, or I think that it's hard not to get an increase since they didn't get one last year, but maybe there's some movement there that would get us closer to our budget number.
Just to clarify, Dan, if we don't continue to give increases, does that essentially mean that their employees kind of stay flatline with their wages, which is where your concern comes from with getting the quality employees?
Correct. Yeah. The NPPC starts to struggle to give the same quality of employee because they can't match the wage.
Questions?
We were looking really good until that tax hit us.
Yeah, no, that's, I think there's a lot of companies that are saying the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with the October 1st reason, this might be a good one to make a decision on today. Unless you're going to, the decision is to not give the 3%, then we can hold off on them.
I would say I want to look at still all of it. I mean, I know it's what I don't want to get into. It's like we have to be making the decision, not getting one off. It's like without seeing the whole sheet, we need to go. Yes, I mean, I think I will be yes, but I don't want to say that today, not knowing the asks that are coming either. So we know we got a lot.
Sure. How long?
If
they were to make a decision, say on the 29th. I'm just looking at the schedule. Most of the budgets will be through by the 29th. Can you turn something?
All I have to do is, all I have to do is sign the addendum. I mean, I either signing it saying yes or signing it saying no. So it just has to be before October 1, so that they can show on their books that there was no change to the contract after October 1.
And
or starting
we can make the decision sooner. I just want to look
see a bit more. You are the first.
Yeah.
This second, I guess. Public records are gone.
I think, I mean, obviously it's gonna save
just a clarification. So if we didn't do the 3%, does that mean we do get hit by the tax for that period of time?
Because there would be no change.
Well, I appreciate that you basically found a way to pay for it by balancing the overall budget, right? So I'm feeling like maybe we should assume it will be granted because it's net neutral in your budget unless we change our minds before 10/1. So we can come back and give it one double check in a couple of weeks just to verify once we have more information.
And as Commissioner Walter said, I mean, is there any way to like look at it over the next couple of years? We've got 3 years left on this contract.
We could ask them, I mean, they have a right to say no, I mean, they have a right to, so Public Works ended their security, which we oversee the contract and manage, but they ended their security roving for over in motor pool area. And that had been in place since the beginning, actually prior to this contract. So when these numbers were originally given out, we have screening services that are required by juvenile on the weekends. And so they were able to, with the roving on the weekends and that, combine that together. When they removed that, Public Works removed that security, it left the weekends completely open. And they don't have a shift to tie that to. They want to keep this contract, make it work and not be a burden. And they basically come to us and said, listen, we're going to go ahead and eat the 4 hours. We're going to, you guys can pay for the hour and 75 minutes screening time. We're going to eat the 4 hours that we would pay our guard, because we pay our guards a minimum of 4 hours. So, they really are trying very hard to make this work. And they understand the burden that it is putting on the county with the tax and everything else. So yes, I mean, all options are on the table, but I don't feel they're trying to just get more money. You know, they want to continue to provide a good service and meet our needs. I think the 3% is a reasonable ask, especially without getting anything last year. You know, and cost of living looked like a 2.7, you know, overall. So they're asking for a very minimal amount over. So.
And our plan is just to, like, when public records came in, they had to ask 15,000, give or take. I forget the exact number. But when we do the afternoon roll-ups, we will be presenting you the ongoing list you've had, just to jog your memory. And this, we can put a 10-1 deadline beside that. So as you see more and get a better feel for what's going on, I know it's very early, and in the next couple of weeks, you could say yes or no definitively. But we do plan on keeping that list in front of you, so as you look at new things, you're not forgetting what has already done.
And we also are, you'll see on the agendas, we're having, you know, maybe up to 30 minutes end of every budget workshop to do a recap. So this is one that we just bring back up under one of those.
Okay, let's bring it back up on Monday, September 22nd. And that gives plenty of time to, you know, for us to
feel for the rest of everything.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Up next with a couple of medical fund, HR, parking.
I put my presentation together backwards. So we're actually going to start with HR, employee development, parking, and then go into medical fund. So Ron, if you want to go to the next slide for me, please. So our HR 2026 budget was, I guess I want to start it out with, I actually gave back more than I needed to. So in the reports that I pulled, there were some benefit costs that weren't showing up in the reports. So trying to be a good steward of money, I actually put this back into expenses, and I wound up giving back $11,241 more than I needed to. So I more than balanced my budget. After talking with Jeff last week, I am requesting that we just balance me back to a balanced budget so that I get those funds back, since I was looking at reports that weren't correct, honestly.
So some of this is Questica to Workday. This is something we would have done before paperwork was put out, had found it in that timeline. But since it was found after the paperwork came out, we felt we didn't want to. We're talking about something that's different on your paper. So there's just shy of $12,000, about 11,800, which would take her up to a level budget to last year. She came in last year's, still hitting the target. Yep.
So I'll walk through some. So the numbers you see on the slides are going to be a little bit different, but I still had to cut a significant amount of funding out of these budgets. So I'll walk through that. But I literally estimated a couple of programs with the cuts. So if I could have that 12,000 back, some of my asks won't be quite as steep. So I'll walk you guys through that. So for just the HR budget itself, I took an expense reduction of $150,950. That was eliminating the classification and compensation analyst position, which I actually attrited this year. We had an HRS analyst leave. The person that was in the comp and class analyst role promoted into the HRIS analyst role. And so I've actually had that position open most of this year. So not only was there a budget savings for 2025, but it would have future budget savings. That said, it is the one position in Spokane County that does all of the classification and compensation for all of our contracts, all of our union, all of our non-rep. So that work has had to be redistributed to my generalists, and that means other work sometimes doesn't get done as quickly. And there are, and I'll admit it, we have some errors that have come up in the last contract because you have 3 or 4 people now working on this work rather than one. So we lost a bit of the continuity. continuity. As we find the errors, we work with our bargaining units and we fix them. But we did have a couple in the last round that we're working on correcting right now because of that loss of continuity. But it is a headcount savings, but in the event you would like to give it back to me, I would love to have it.
Question on that. Have you been able to fix the analysis prior to entering into contracts?
No, this last one we found it after the fact. So, and it was with 1553, which is hundreds and hundreds of positions. So this, so in working with them, we realized there were a few at implementation that just looked really off. And so we're working with the unions right now to correct those grades and what that means moving forward. So,
would that require like an amendment to the contract? Okay.
Yep. So it does have impact when you stretch that out from one person to multiple people. There is just more risk, honestly, because we're not looking. Typically, when someone's doing comp, they're looking at the full picture. They understand how all the contracts, all of the wages roll up on one and the next, right? With supervisory. So when you split that out over multiple people, we just lose that continuity of one person having the full scope of all of that comp work. So we are getting through it. But like I said, it does create some potential risk, but we just work through it as it's come up. Another position that was eliminated this year that I did not fill, but I do plan on using a little bit of these funds for an extra help on the back half of the year for a little bit of comp work that needs to get done that my team just doesn't have capacity for right now, is an extra help position. Historically, they've done all of the digital conversion for the HR office for files going paperless. So all of our employee files doing that work. So it's a $30,000 a year budget savings in future years. And also I've not used any of those funds this year in 2025, recognizing it could have been a difficult budget year for the county. So that position I'm comfortable not having in future years. Again, it would be helpful from a comp perspective if we don't get the full-time position back. But again, I recognize the situation the county's in and we can do that work. It just uses that comp. Another budget that was reduced is travel. I have 13 employees that impact this for training with all of their CPEs and associated travel. So it brought it down from 10,000 to 8,000. This is one that I would add back in if we get that $11,841 back so that I can ensure that my staff has adequate funding to go to the events. The biggest one that I send someone to every year is the Workday Rising. It's critical that our HRIS analyst goes to that. We learn a ton when we go to that conference. The budget team also sends someone, but we send our ERP analyst, and then we also send an IT person. So it's really critical. I'd like to be able to send someone to a larger, more broad HR legal conference as well. And by getting myself back to the 10,000, that allows for us to hit a few more of those trainings. Employee appreciation, that's another budget that I pulled money out of. I initially pulled $14,420 out. With the add back of the almost $12,000, I can add some funds back to that. So I actually will be able to add back about $5,800, which gets me to $11,500-ish. So realistically, I'd only have to reduce that budget by $6,359. That budget covers all things employee appreciation, like the pins, the certificates, the plaques, the watches, all of the things that we purchase for our employees for their annual events. If we don't have those funds, it means realistically, I cut out all pins. I cut out all certificates. I cut out anything other than probably just the frames and the picture of the county courthouse that we give our retirees when they leave. So the little bit of budget that would leave me with can still allow us to at least do something to recognize our retirees. Additionally, I cut out the employee appreciation event for an annual savings of $7,000. Currently, my budget sits at $9,000, so that leaves us with $2,000 total budget. I know it sounds really ridiculous, but realistically, we could distribute an employee appreciation cookie, which we did last year, in addition to the event that we did. So it really just allows me to send out a treat to everyone once a year if we cut that budget. That would be what my budget would look like for HR. So my recommendation for add back with some of those funds, like I mentioned, would be the travel and then some of the employee appreciation. Next slide, please. My next budget is employee development. This is specifically for county employees. So I do have one employee that's coded into this from a headcount perspective, Judy Cash does all of our county training. She helps put on leader build. She does all of our DISC training, all of our DISC assessments. She's responsible for new hire orientation, all of our onboarding, all of that good stuff. So with this, I reduced the employee training category. It's typically 8,000. I reduced it in half by 4,000. This is another one that I'd like to give funding back into using that 11,841. Reason being is this is not something that we spent for the HR department. This is something we spend across the county. So this budget pays for all of our DISC training for the county, which has actually been going really well. We've had really positive feedback. And we have more and more employee groups that are starting to utilize this for team building within their department. It's creating a lot better communications with across our teams. And so if we don't put this money back in and reduce it to 4,000, we'd probably get about halfway through the year. And then we'd have to have departments purchase their own certificates and programs if they wanted to continue. So this is one I'd like to put the money back into as well. It's been such a positive thing that we're seeing in departments that have been utilizing this. And I think it's a real loss to the county, honestly, if we don't continue to offer this for departments. We are about a third of the way through the county right now, but it's been really exciting to see teams coming in and spending a day with us, doing leadership training with their teams, doing team building, and then doing this. Next slide, please. Next one is parking. So I reduced expenses in our parking budget and our other repair and maintenance by $34,130. This is realistic. Just looking at our current spend rate, bearing some sort of catastrophic maintenance events in a parking lot, we should be fine. So this is one that I would recommend that we leave reduced. If something crazy happens, I would come back to you guys, let you know if we needed to do an amendment. But traditionally, we've given back a significant amount of money every year out of this budget. So this is just more realistic, I think, for us. It also still gives us a bit of a buffer if we have a larger snow event than normal and we outspend our snow and plowing. And it also allows to continue things like striping our lots, putting up fencing if need be in certain areas. So I feel very comfortable with this expense reduction. Like I mentioned in previous parking presentations, we are increasing our rates this year, so I'll have a better idea of revenue in 2027. But I know we will still be operating in the red, but I think we'll be less red this year. I'm just not quite sure how much. So I'll have a much better idea in 2027 what this budget will really be looking like. Any questions on those three that roll up into the overarching HR?
Can you walk me through again that DISC training? What is that exactly?
Yep. So it's an assessment that we do that it's a personality assessment, but it works for communication skills. So what we do is we run assessments. We've actually done it in Leader Build for all of our leaders, which was really cool. But it basically tells you your style. So are you a driver, influential, support, and consistent? But there's things that go into that. So what types of personality traits might we see? What does your work style look like? What type of work do you typically enjoy? And so when we do those in a department, we're able to sit down with everyone and put everyone up on the board and chart them. And really it talks about, like, for example, I'm a strong D. Like, I like to get things done. I don't need a lot of details. I want to just make things happen. I is my second trait. Like, I help influence. I can make things move usually. Jeff and I are actually the exact same. Then I'm a C, meaning I also really like to analyze data, but it shows your levels so people can see I'm really high actually for those three. My S is pretty much non-existent. So gentle, caring, emotional, not my thing. I try really hard when I'm here, which you can see that in the scores as well, that my personal life, I have almost none of that. So like, pray for my husband. But when I come to work, I try to turn that on as much as I can, but you can see where people's natural style is, and then they're adapted to work. So we can understand what's Ashley's regular style, but also how does she react in work. But typically when stressors come in, people migrate to their normal style. So as we see higher stress, higher frustration at work, we're going to watch people slide more into that natural. So it really helps all of us, once we know each other's styles, to understand how do we like to communicate. I know when I sit down and talk to Jeff, he and I are just going to be, we don't really care about the details. Let's get through it. Let's make a decision and let's move on. Someone else like Scott, who's very highly analytical, he's going to probably want to talk through the details a bit more. So we know that when we meet with Scott, we're probably going to need to have a lot more details than what Jeff and I are usually comfortable with to help Scott help us understand, like, what are we missing? And then we can all make a decision together. So it really gives us the ability to understand who's on our team, how we work together, but also how we present information to one another. We've seen huge growth in a lot of our departments where people were just running into brick walls with each other. They weren't communicating, they weren't understanding, they were getting stuck in places, they didn't have the right members on the team. And through DISC, they've been able to really understand, how do we work together better as a group? How do we have the right members on the team to make good decisions? If you have a bunch of Jeff and I in the room, like, we're going to miss a lot of details, honestly, and we'll probably make decisions that might not always include everything. But when you have more people with your S and your C, you're going to get people that are analytical, but also people that have feelings and are going to make sure they balance us. So it's a really cool tool that helps us understand, what do we have, how do we work together, and how do we make sure that we are all functioning better as a group as we move forward.
Our civil division went through it recently since I've been here, and I thought it was really effective for building communication, getting to know each other a little bit better, and helping us function as a better team.
Okay. And is it a membership? Is that why it's 4,000 a year? Is there like do we have a membership to some like DISC website or something like that? I guess.
Yeah, so it's not a membership, it's a per user fee for the certifications. So as in a couple of years, hopefully as we get through the bulk of our employees, we can start to see that number come down. But right now, for every certification, there's a cost for that test, basically, and then the certification. And then as we get new employees in, the goal would be, like in civil, if we have new hires, maybe we have 1 or 2 that we purchase a year for the civil rather than the entire division. Right. So it's just that cost right now is, as we're starting to get through everybody, there's a cost associated with every single user that is taking that test.
Okay. And you reference a certification. Are you getting do you have to be like, is there a trainer? Is somebody to administer?
No, I use the wrong word. It's really more of just like, it's your user request fee.
Okay.
But we don't pay for a certification. We don't pay for the membership. Judy Cash and myself have been through many of these, so we're kind of the head trainer, so to speak.
Okay.
In the past, when the county used StrengthsFinder, that did require a certification and ongoing membership.
And I remember that.
I took us away from that. That was not the right model for the county to be using. It's a great tool, but it just wasn't good for the county, honestly. And so this right now is more, it's a user-based fee rather than a full certification and training fees and all that stuff that the StrengthsFinder with.
Just a question. I'm just looking at one of the charts we have as shows the positions by department going back a ways. So it looks like in 2019 there was 12 FTEs in HR. It's been up like 16 point something. Currently it says 15.6 filled.
Yeah.
So if we leave the comp analyst unfilled, would it be at that 15? That's the FTE head count. 15.
Yeah, but that includes parking too. So that's not technically HR. So 3 of those are parking. And so since I've been at the county, a little bit of history. So the commissioners back in 2020, when we implemented the Evergreen study, they awarded the compensation and classification analyst position. So that was a new headcount add in an effort to continue continuity moving forward. So that was a decision made in 2020 or 2021. After that, COVID came in and my department took COVID over and we used ARP funding to add an additional COVID headcount. When COVID died down, that funding actually had already moved into general fund. I don't know the reasoning for that, but basically I think it was when we started moving a bunch of stuff around. So I took some of that COVID headcount that was a very high paid employee, and then I brought in some lower level. I brought in another recruiting person basically, but is almost primarily working with Public Works now, doing their staffing, especially since Kathy Westby, who had previously been in the Public Works department, retired, and that position was not backfilled. So my department took on a majority of that work to help support Public Works. And so that's where that headcount came from. And then in 2022, I want to say, the commissioners approved an additional headcount for a third generalist to be added, as we found there's a significant amount of work that happens regularly in our departments. Again, with Kathy Westby retiring, we've also increased the support model to Public Works pretty strongly. So that third headcount was specifically added to help backfill in Public Works and the other departments, as having 2 generalists for almost 2,000 employees is really difficult. And for us to be true business partners, we were awarded that third position.
That's to piggyback on that. What year did the 2 parking individuals get added to your
So when I
account?
first started at the county, it was funky, to be honest. So we had, some of them were in extra help work for a while, some were not. So I honestly, when I looked at this, and even when I got the report from Jason, I still couldn't make heads or tails of it. Also the benefits person sometimes shows up in the general fund and sometimes shows up in the medical fund. I think we got that corrected finally. So I think in the numbers now, they're correctly showing in the benefits fund. But I have to be honest, I've been struggling to understand the headcount.
But like if we go back to 2019, the 11.8 is one of the, or
I wasn't here in 2019.
okay, do we think 2 of those people are the parking people?
Those numbers are
Okay.
on the FTE. So if the,
So the 11.8
Parking
could
was-
have it, or it
It
might
was.
not. We don't know.
without knowing that, I could ask Jason to find that one out.
But I will say we have picked up 3 headcount over since I've been here.
Yeah.
So a generalist, the compensation analyst, and then the recruiting assistant.
Okay.
Any other questions? The one other thing I would plug there is we have not chosen to direct bill Public Works for the additional work that we've done with them. It's something I've considered, and I haven't even talked to Kyle about it, but I do have another one of my departments currently doing that because we're backfilling in risk a significant amount of training that we typically have not been doing in there, but they have somebody who's out on medical leave. So if we were to really look at the percentage of time that I have HR people spending in Public Works, I know there's cost allocation behind the scene, but I would argue that we likely are not seeing the full amount of time that we are currently spending in Public Works since Kathy Westby's retirement. So from a headcount perspective, I have at least 1 full-time person doing work in the department. So overall, on those budgets, I had originally reduced expenses by $189,000 essentially. Again, I'd like to ask for that 11,841 back, so we'd be looking at like 175,000. Next slide, please. Next up is our medical fund, and I just wanted to make sure that we were aware. I know I've briefly touched on kind of my concerns about the medical fund and funding, and I wanted to really speak to the forecasting and what we're seeing right now. So as a reminder, our 508 medical fund pays for medical care, RX prescription, the utilization of plans, so just people using our plans, administration fees, our stop loss. There's 1 full-time person who is in that, which is our 1 benefits person. Also, she not only does all of our benefits for Spokane County, she also does all of our leave management. And then the medical fund also pays for all things wellness. So our wellness consultant that we have, and then any extra activities. Next slide, please. This is a little bit of an eye chart from this far away, but really what you can see is our costs are increasing substantially. So over the last year or so, I've kind of had that gut feeling of I've been seeing higher and higher claims cost and higher prescription costs come in. That spidey sense turned into, yep, we are in fact seeing significant increases. And so I just charted it out here for you to see it. So from 2019 through current, you can see, especially in the last couple of years, steep increases in our costing. Originally, I had thought, well, maybe we have a lot more plan members. Maybe that makes up a difference. It does not. So we've got about 100 or so more plan members, which should not account for the increase. So and 100 actually is lower than I expected with our increased headcount of about 100 employees over the last few years. I actually expected to see a much higher membership number. So unfortunately, I could not draw a correlation between that. But what that does tell us is that the cost of medical are increasing. Speaking with Alliant and others in our industry, we're not the only one experiencing this. So medical costs are increasing substantially across the board. Believe it or not, our book of business are actually relatively healthy as compared to other entities. And so these costs are actually pretty standard from what people are seeing across the industries. Our utilization also was fairly low in 2020, 2021, and 2022. Well, if you remember what those years were, those were COVID. And a lot of people were not going to the doctor or getting surgeries or doing their normal things during COVID. So like, again, most other groups coming into 2023, 2024, 2025, we saw those utilization rates jump again because people are going back to the doctors. Next slide, please.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So you have like the total expenditures right now in the fund. Do you have is there data like number of claims per person or anything like that that could show more like the utilization of individuals versus just the cost of care generally? Would be interesting.
I've looked at that, and we do have higher utilization, but there is also a higher cost. Honestly, they don't directly correlate. Again, it's really interesting. We have a few users that have really high claims cost every year, and that stayed really consistent. And then utilization has picked up, which is increased cost. But the other things that are increasing costs substantially are pharmaceutical. That's been a big one. A lot of these name brand drugs, especially for Crohn's and diabetes, are patented right now, and they are massively driving our costs up. So things like Stanton and Humira and Ozempic, actually, for diabetes, those are massive prescriptions that we're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars more a year for those prescriptions. The other thing that we are seeing is the cost of medical contracts are increasing. So as we're seeing groups renegotiate their own contracts, like if any of you are Premera members, you would have seen over the last few weeks that Spokane OBGYN was no longer going to be covered under Premera. They just renegotiated the contract and came to an agreement. That has impact. U of W had that same thing happen a couple years ago. That has impact because those groups are not renegotiating at the same cost of the contract. They're increasing higher, right? So all of these things have direct impact on our plans. So next slide, this is a bit of an eye chart as well, and it's just a portion of it. There's an appendix slide that actually has all of the projections on it, but my concern, and what has been my concern, is that we had rebuilt our reserve to a really healthy place in 2023. But as we've seen our spending increase, and as we've been taking really low premium increases, honestly, compared to other entities, we're starting to eat into that reserve. And so what you can see in the slides between those barred lines is that we had built our reserve up to about 18.4 in 2023, which actually probably was a little bit healthy, to be honest. But since then, with the increase in our costs, we're eating into those very quickly. So in 2024, we saw ourselves drop to about 16.9. In 2025, based on our current run rate, we're expected to have reserves of about 13. And then if we look into future years, we start running through those numbers very quickly. With the 2026 projections, this is taking an 8% increase on medical funds, which budget did put into our budgets for 2026. It was originally going to be a 5%, but with the reduction in pension that we got from Washington State, the budget department threw some of that into our medical so that we could keep our medical funds hopefully at still a healthy level. If we look at 2027 projections, I had just estimated a 13% increase in the fund. Again, that's just an estimation right now, but a 13% increase keeps us right at around that 8 million mark, which we're required to stay at in order to remain healthy and self-funded and to not be put on a plan to bring monies back up. That also that 8 million mark requires an actuarial study to be at that mark, which is not something we've done in a while. So we'll be getting that done in 2026. But in the past at the county, this fund for some reason did not have actuary studies on it. And so I've had a lot of help from Tim Donovan in the auditor's office with some of these projections, because this is what he used to do at the city, and he had the capacity to help me, and he actually likes it, which is helpful. And so with his help, this is how I landed on these numbers, but it really does show that we need to get an actuary study in here as well, so that we can make sure that they see what we see. But I do have concerns for these funds as we continue to look forward. We've discussed it in previous meetings, but for 2027, it had already been on our plan to be reviewing our medical plans, to be reviewing what options we do or don't have. Are we in the right place? Are we not? I know WASAC is currently working on potentially some sort of pool plan as well that we are interested in seeing when they get that together and considering when we do this review. I've also been told to look at PEB. There's some people that think it's less expensive. There's some think it's more. When we ran the actual analysis, it does not appear to be a savings. It was a quick look that we did a couple weeks ago again, and then we also did it a couple of years ago. But it will be another that we're looking at 2027 to really understand what options do we have. But I really wanted to bring this to your attention so that you could see the actual numbers. So when I say that I have concerns for this fund, it is valid that we're going to have to be considering what we do with this fund in the future. The other thing to keep in mind right now is we have our employees pay a very low percentage of the premium shares. So if you are employee only, you only pay 5% of the premium, and the county pays 95% of the premium. If you are employee plus family or spouse, you pay 10% of the premium, and the county pays 90%. That is an amazing cost share, honestly, as compared to our competitors. For other counties, they still are kind of in a similar place, but as we're looking at the city, for example, they're more of an 80-20 split. And so from a general fund perspective, and again, not something that we need to make a decision on today, but in the future, we may need to look at, do we need to change the employee-employer split of cost sharing to help the general fund not have to subsidize all of this and have the employees help pay a bit more of that premium share. We do still have Cadillac plans, $500 deductible, $30 co-pays. They're amazing plans. We have looked at changing the plan structure even recently. It doesn't do enough to these numbers, though. Really, what would start changing these numbers would be a full redesign and then a cost sharing perspective. As a reminder, all of that has to be negotiated. We cannot just make those decisions as much as we would love to. Those all have to be negotiated. So just something for us to keep in mind, though, as we are looking at future years. We are looking at higher increases to keep this fund solvent. Even with our projected increases of 8% this year and potentially 13% next year, believe it or not, that's still lower than what we're seeing across industry. So most groups have been taking double-digit increases for the last 3 to 5 years. We've been taking single-digit between 3 and 5%. So we have significantly stayed kind of behind the curve of what we had to take in the past, but just with the costs that we're seeing of increasing in medical, we now need to start looking at what sort of increases should we be taking. Again, it's not a place I want to be, but I needed you guys to see this to understand where my gut's been sitting and that we are headed in that direction. And so we will be looking like this in 2027. The reason why I can't make this happen in 2026, again, like I mentioned, we have Workday going live at the end of 2025, December, meaning 2026 is payroll, HR, benefits, all of that launches in Workday. And if we've learned anything from finance, you need a good year to get your feet under you, to make sure everything works and is successful before we can even imagine taking on another project, especially because I have one person that works in benefits in this county. And so asking her to do all things benefits in Workday while taking on this project is not, it's just not possible, honestly. And I don't have the capacity myself to take on this full project with the rest of the scope of work either. So if we wait till 2027, between she and I, we can balance this much better, obviously putting a work team in place. But for us, it needs to be a 2027 project. It also better aligns with our contracts so that Josh has information, Josh Grote, and can start working on the negotiations if there are going to be changes. This is our 508 fund. Any questions that I could answer for you? Next slide, please.
Ashley, can you share a little more about the methodology for how the $8 million is calculated for fund balance?
Yeah, so we're looking at our current expenses as well as our future expenses projection using our current run rate. So even that, to be honest, makes me a little bit nervous because our utilization, our run rate, we just kept it with what we've seen this year. We haven't put an escalator, substantial escalator on it into future years. So it's really just looking at what is our trend been for the plan for the last year, and then just projecting that into future years.
Specifically around the statutory requirement for having a minimum fund balance.
Oh.
What is that? You would reference $8 million.
Yes.
Stay above.
Statutory that we have to stay above $8 million so long as I go get the actuary studied out. If I don't, it's actually higher than that. I want to say it's 12,000 that we actually have to sit at that Tim was able to find for me and buried in an RCW. And so statutorily, we need to stay right around that 8 million. Otherwise, basically the state can come in and say, we're going to put you on a plan to get you back into what they believe is a healthy zone. And these are the increases that we would be required to take moving forward to get back to that place. So we would like to continue to be able to manage that ourselves and not have to be put on a plan. And we believe that we can, but we do have to stay above that 8 million mark in order to continue to pass audits.
It's based on 2 months of usage, plan usage. Okay, so that's the calculation behind it. It's 2 months of plan usage, and it sets your minimum fund balance you need to maintain. So looking out into, and you'll see back in the appendix if you want to go back. There's a lot of details behind it. You can see what the trending up in plan utilization has been, costs, the revenues, which is all the contributions that the county and the employees make. That differential essentially shows what the impact of the fund balance is. So by 2027, based on utilization, about 8 million is where it's suggesting we need to have a fund balance out. So based on these projections, if we took an 8, which is what's built into the assumptions for 2026, we would need to take a 13% increase in 27 to maintain that, to be able to stay above the 2 months plan utilization. So it's a question for the commissioners to ponder is, do we want to wait and take the 13% in 27, or should we try to take some of it this year if there's availability in revenues? Now, not all that will affect the general fund, but a great majority of it will affect the general.
Yeah, so if we took like a 10% this year, we could be looking at more like a 10%, 10.5% next year. So long as utilization stays consistent or costing stays consistent. If other groups negotiate higher costs within Premera or Kaiser, there's impact. If we see more people, if we see higher claims, if we have a couple more big hitters, cancer, something like that. Preemie babies are a big one. That one massively impacts us. And then again, the prescriptions, those are the ones that we're really seeing drive a lot of costs right now. Our providers are working to get people on generics and appropriates. I met with Kaiser actually on Thursday last week, and we chatted about this. But both groups, honestly, even as much as our prescription costs are doing a really good job managing our prescriptions. But unfortunately, we just see a lot of people in this area for some reason seeming to have Crohn's, MS, diabetes, and those are a lot of those big drugs right now that are still patented for many years. The other thing that I also learned on Thursday that I didn't realize, but we'll likely see an increase in the Ozempic Zepbound use in the next coming year. It is just officially been approved for FDA use for sleep apnea, for some liver disease. So what primarily had been diabetes is going to be expanded pretty substantially under the new FDA approval, and that prescription is incredibly expensive. So I do expect us to see increases. Our plan, because we're self-funded, we still get to make choices around elective things. So I have not approved us using those for weight loss, which is what many people actually use that drug for. Zepbound is specifically for weight loss. Because we're self-funded, we have a right to say yes or no. We don't have to take that because it's an elected, it's not a medical. So that has been able to keep our costs lower. Just a reminder, if we move to a plan that is not self-funded, so like a pooled or a PEP, and the plan wants to take that, we don't have the ability to opt out of some of that stuff in the future. So right now, we've been able to mitigate some of our cost because of being self-funded. But even with that said, I expect to see our prescription costs increase in 2026 because of the utilization expanding on some of these really high expensive drugs.
To Josh's question on the parking FTEs, Jason heard it, went back through. They were moved in July of 2019. And that graph you guys have was always pulled as of year end. So they would have been incorporated in all of those years. Now it's back. The parking would be assumed in your graph in all years. Parking was moved in July. The one FTE, they're 2.5s at that time.
So the increases, you're talking about premium increases, which we can determine, or how does that get?
Yes, so we determine
because we're self-funded.
Yep, exactly. And so Jeff, Tessa, Jason, they built into the budget 8%. Last year was 5%. It was going to be a 5%, but again, because we had the pension savings, we moved it to an 8%. But if you guys wanted to take more than that, you guys could just direct us to do that. I would highly recommend not taking less based on the trajectory of this fund, but you could technically tell us to take a 0% if you want to.
So it's the cost share that's negotiated, but not necessarily the premium rate.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and the cost share is in the contracts right now, as I described, and in our accounting policy for non-revenue.
So you're saying follow up the actuary study you would recommend next year, and that would kind of inform what we need going forward.
Yeah, and Tim is phenomenal. I would assume it comes in almost directly overlapped with this, but it also offers us some protection by staying around that 2-month mark instead of having to move to a 3-month mark because we have an actuary study.
So in taking, say, the 8% for next year, so what's the calculation on how much is general fund versus how much are employees?
I don't. It's not off the top of my head, but I would say it's probably 93%, 94% is general fund.
Okay. So I'd like to see what that effect is.
Out of the
Oh, because public works, you're right.
Yeah.
But I would assume public works pays out of their funds.
Yeah.
So I would need
Security
budgets for
services.
that have access to that allocation.
We could come with it, similar to what we did on the liability calculation. We know the breakouts between each of the departments and just kind of team.
As we're looking at the general fund, we got to know what effect that has as we're giving back to departments and all of that.
Yep.
So we'll get that information pulled and get back to you.
Yes.
That'd be good.
Questions answered?
More questions.
Perfect. That's all my stuff.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? So did we make a decision on the 11,000 or waiting on that?
That is your choice on the 11.8 that she came in under budget. Do you guys want to make a decision on that now?
Well, it seems like it was kind of an error-based thing.
That's
that
we would have included it in the budget. That have been down 72 hours earlier.
Oh, good morning.
1 or 2 hour decision makers.
Good morning. Thank you for coming today. Absolutely. Appreciate it.
Morning.
Good morning, Ray. Yeah. Okay, so let's see, we're just talking about budgets and all these budgets right now, so.
Perfect. Well, I'll introduce myself, Kim Kraymars, the Finance Director at the Health District.
And Ray Byrne, the Environmental Public Health Division Director, standing in for.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So you're one of our outside agencies that we sent letters to, that we asked, you were in before, to look at your budgets and help us, guide us as we make decisions on, on cuts, as you're hearing all the departments come before us right now. So I think in the letter that we sent to you guys, we asked for what would a $500,000 cut look like, and what would $1 million cut. So,
okay. Well, we can with the previous documents for the packet, we did send a financial document, 1 page. Then there's a Word document we'll get into in a minute. But the real short, sweet answer is the teams worked really hard on going through each department budget, working with our program managers and the division directors on where things can be trimmed, made more efficient. And one of the emphasis was also any grant awards that we have, that we live within the grant award, that we're not asking in for additional funding from the district to support the grant. And so based on our county contribution last year, which was the $2,053,959, we were able to bring it down $678,395. So our county contribution ask would be the $1,375,564. And so one of the questions that was also asked of us to share was the different funding streams with the health district. 2026, we are projecting a $57.8 million budget overall. Of that, about $6 million is flexible dollars, and they come from 3 different funding streams. So the first box on the left there is the local government assistance. It comes from the state of Washington treasurer. This was the replacement of the motor vehicle excise tax from years ago. And you'll see it's flatlined. The 2877318 has been constant for multiple years. That's one of our funding streams of the flexible. About 40% of flexible comes from this funding stream. We receive it every January and July. So those are somewhat advanced to us. And then foundational public health. Yeah.
So because that has stayed so flat, how does that calculate? Obviously, it's not calculated on population. If it hasn't changed, how has that? What's their justification for just keeping that a flat number?
That's a great question on why they don't have additional. They have it. The legislation lists all of the counties and the dollar amount on how they computed it, and it's just through 2027 they forecasted the same amount.
Okay.
So this is with certainty through 27.
So it could have maybe been population at the beginning,
yes,
and just stayed.
And it has been completely flat since then. All the same counties have received the same application.
Okay. Thank you.
But it is projected or listed in the legislation through 27.
Okay.
So we do have confidence with that number for the following year.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yes. And then foundational public health services is another one that comes up quite a bit. A new funding stream since 2027 for the health department. Foundational public health services are those specific programs and activities that at the state level Department of Health wants to see across the whole system. And so there's 2 funding streams that come in from that. We have very specific FPHS funding, and then we have what we call reinforcing capacity, which is flexible. It's flexible to the extent we have reinforcing capacity and it's specific to FPHS. So for example, I could not use the FPHS reinforcing capacity to support the WIC grant or the treatment services program. They have to be foundational public health services programs. But we do have flexibility, and over time, you'll see, for example, for 2026, we just went through the allocation process with Department of Health and with SALFO, and we do have a decrease from 2025 of 150,000 from that 6036 down to 5886. The FPHS funding the cut was not as significant as we had forecasted and we're anticipating, so we're grateful for that. But we did lose $100,000 to a specific grant, and then 50,000, we were able to make a agency decision on where to take that reduction within our programs. And we had a chronic underspend in an area that was so prescribed that each year we would be sending back some of the funds. So that's where we took the other 50,000 reduction. So this year you'll see the $2,095,000 is continued reinforcing capacity. And there's a goal at the state level to preserve the reinforcing as much as possible. That allows the jurisdictions to utilize FPHS funding in what meets their community needs best. And so that is our other funding stream that's flexible. And that's about 30% of that $6 million. And then of course, the third contribution is Spokane County's contribution. And I've referenced the RCW above, but since 2013, this shows the history of the county contribution, and the $2,053,959 in 2025 was a decrease slightly, about 17,000 from 2024. And that was because in that year we had an uptick and had $17,000 requests from TB, which is the other contribution that county provides to the health district, not flexible, but is treated more like a grant. It's expense reimbursement for our TB program. But we remained flatlined from our ask from the county in 2024, which just had an uptick in TB and decreased the county ask. And then the TB program, I do want to mention the history here. You'll see budget numbers back in 2013 and 14 weren't available in my system that I have currently. And so we're projected in 2025, we budgeted, and the resolution shows a contribution up to $420,885. But based on the expenses that we're running currently, we're projected to be at $471 in 2025. And so at the top of the spreadsheet shows the county contribution, the TB program. So although we're down with our county contribution ask down by 678,000, we're projecting a request here for TB to hire an additional nurse for the response, and the costs with associated benefits and indirects would be the $134,970. So the net reduction from county contribution for the flexible dollars and the TB program is a decrease of $543,425. Our projected budget for 2026 is real similar to 2025. It's just about 250,000 more, 57,813,000. And part of that is the treatment services expansion. So we have additional expenses there for the additional FTE on the expansion, but we've also had reductions across the programs. So our current FTE is 273, and this would bring us to the 281.25, primarily from treatment services expansion.
Jim, the jump from under the TB category for TB yes. program, the jump from 23 to 24, that was the hiring of a new nurse, correct?
Yes, it definitely was.
So now you're saying you'd like to hire another nurse on top of it?
Yeah, correct. And the documentation, the other document that was submitted is prepared by Mark Springer, who oversees the TB program. Dr. Velasquez has also reviewed the document to share. The environment that they're in, that we've been in for a while, is the complexity of the cases, the contacts that have to be treated as well. And our current nurses, we have 2 full-time nurses, and they're running 15 to 20 hours of overtime each week, each of them, in addition to having a community health worker that's helping. And so that's where it's appropriate for us to bring forth at this time, showing the increase in the caseload. And Dr. Velasquez has shared that this does not appear to be a one-time uptick, but more the new standard where we're at today. So we try to prepare that, or this document, to answer some questions there.
So what's driving the increased number of cases?
That's a little bit out of my wheelhouse, so I've wanted to defer a bit to the document that was prepared. And so the biggest challenge with TB treatment is that they have to do the direct observation therapy, go to the home or the isolation location of the client, and observe them taking the medication. And that can't be done with other staffing positions. It has to be the nurse who actually administers the medication. And with the uptick, you'll see on page 2 of this document that was prepared, the chart shows the number of cases, persons that are under case management as early as August of 25, where we're up in the between 30 and 35 individuals. And back in 2023, we were down to less than 5.
The overtime savings, you get a third nurse, was that netted out of the 135 fully loaded for a nurse?
Yes, I was. And then we do have wraparound costs. That's another big component of the TB program, is in addition to the medication and the staff time, there are costs associated with what it involves for isolating that individual, and each case is unique. Sometimes we can isolate and maybe it's in a hotel room. Sometimes it can be within the home itself if they're treating everyone in the home. But some of those wraparound costs, they're somewhat unique because we work with the individual on what their immediate needs are and what we can do to ensure that they're compliant with the treatments. And so sometimes that involves bringing food into the home, providing the meal so that they're not obviously going out into the community and making purchases. So there's significant wraparound costs as well as the individual time. And then I just emphasize too, you'll see in the budget or the TB program over the history, you'll see what we have in the budget versus what we actually bill the county for. So it is expense reimbursement. Even if we ask for an additional cost, we may or may not hit that mark. Of course, with an additional FTE, we're going to be closer. But there are 2 other TB funding streams that we have. The FPHS funding that we mentioned, 28,000 is allocated to TB, not a large amount, but there is a prescribed amount. So the first 28,000 we bill to the FPHS program and utilize those dollars first. And then the Department of Health has a DOH TB program, and it's about 30,000. So we also bill that first before we actually ask for the county contribution. And then of course, you'll see in the history, we've had like previous to this, the last nurse, or even in 2024, we projected 403,000, but we ultimately billed the county 361. So there is some cost savings when we can bill the other, but that's reflected in 2026 budget, those 2 other funding streams. And we're happy to bring back Dr. Velasquez and or Mark Springer to talk in much more detail about the TB program. And so this was the documentation we wanted to share with you today, which is separate conversation from the county contribution of the 2 million. So pretty proud that we were able to get it down to the 678, really by trimming some things up and everybody doing really solid work with the budgets.
Which is great. Okay, Commissioner Waldorf has a question.
Oh, yes. So, all right. My camera keeps freezing on me. Okay. To Jeff's, so I think Jeff was just kind of referring to this. So you're looking at this year that potentially you'd be billing the county more for the TB services, right? When you look at the 420 versus the 471, and I'm assuming that's the overtime. I think that's what Jeff was getting at, right? The overtime.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, thanks for the detailed information about the TB. It's just frustrating that, it's so highly contagious and hard to treat. So in the 678, I know reduction, I know that the Board of Health will make final decisions on what that would look like in terms of impacts and FTEs, but just to give a sense, are you looking at cutting vacant positions or currently filled positions? How many FTEs would that impact approximately if we were to make that reduction to the health district?
So without going into too much detail with, you know, we have unions to report to and so forth, but we have identified vacant positions that we would not be backfilling. There are a couple of reductions in force that would take place based on the 678, approximately 2. And then if we were asked to go beyond the 678, approximately $100,000 per FTE is what it would translate to if we were to go deeper cuts. And that's about where we're at now, is that we've minimized that impact, but if we have to go any deeper, it would essentially relate to FTEs. And part of our funding, a lot of it is grant funded, and so we're living within the grant. So it's really where we make reductions for the county ask or the county contribution is from some very specific programs that rely heavily on the local dollars. And that's where we'd be looking to make those reductions. And that was brought up at the last time we were here. The health equity program, communications, we have data center, homeless outreach coordinator.
So all those positions could be at risk.
Correct.
Those positions could be at risk if we were to make a deeper reduction.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
And I think for me, it's good to see, I mean, because this was part of it, is the state wasn't providing much funding in the past. Like with COVID, then they actually started to boost their funding to provide more dollars to the health districts across the state. So I think, you know, where prior to 21, we were really, you know, pretty much the sole, you know, provider of flexible spending dollars. So I appreciate you guys doing the hard work to look where we could cut and make a difference for the county budget, because that's important for us right now. So, and then TB, I think we probably should just get I would suggest we just get at the health district board meeting kind of an update on where we're at on the TB program, and you know, as part of the budget process, even though the county reimburses, just to see, you know, at there what's really happening with TB and what's going on, just because I think the community needs to be aware of it as well. So that would be my suggestion, is to have Mark and Dr. V give a presentation at the health board. If that's okay with the chair. Do that, you know, but I think this is great for us to be able to know what the possibilities are, you know, from, you know, both sides of the budget with the TV and the county contribution.
How many hours of overtime did you say that is typical right now with the TV nurses on a regular basis? Roughly
15 to 20. There's 2 nurses
per nurse or total?
Per nurse each week. And
that's where the numbers aren't making sense to me. If you have 15 to 20 per nurse per week, that's already a full-time person will be covered. So why is there a need for an 135,000? Seems to me the overtime would be paying for a new nurse. So what's the additional 135,000?
Well, this budget of the 420 for 2025, that's based on 2 nurses and the community worker and their salaries and their wraparound costs. And so based on, they weren't necessarily working 15 to 20 hours.
So it wasn't budgeted.
Yeah,
but the projected is 471. So there's still like an 80,000.
Yes, and that would be the difference by adding an additional nurse. So based on the expenses through July, we forecasted the 471 if we continue to spend at the same level. That's what brought us to the 471. And then the cost of a nurse is the 134 with salaries, benefits, and that we have a 20% increase rate for 2026.
Look, so that's why if we get the presentation at the you know, for us at the health board level, we can ask these questions because what I mean, I get where he's at, but
Just say my wife's a nurse, maybe she won't. $200,000 a year for.
So you can see where it's like, if they're working the equivalent of a full-time in overtime, you would expect that if we hire a nurse, it'd be less expensive than what our actuals would be for this year. Correct. So that's what we're not seeing in this. So
471 would be the logical conclusion as to what next year should be. That's what projected to be.
Yeah. So that's where we need to kind of look at the numbers a little bit more to see what's driving it to go from the 471
Up to 500 would make sense to me. They just seem to look at so.
Well, for the 420 to 500, if we went 420 to 500, it's only 80,000 increase, and our nurse cost is 135. So
You're saying within the four, if I'm understanding you correctly, but the 471 is projected this year, including the current overtime rates.
yes, that is correct.
To me, if you're paying two people 15 to 20 hours a week each for overtime, 471 could pay for an extra nurse already, because you'd be saving the overtime costs.
Time and a half.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful if we pulled out the wraparound costs separate from the staffing costs. I think that would definitely help show the picture a little bit better.
Yeah, because I think that's where we're missing. It's not just the nurse. There's other costs that are going up. Yes. So that's why I think we need to get kind of a detailed presentation of the health board.
And really, and how long the 15 to 20 hours of overtime has been in play. Yeah. They have been in their write-up too. They've tried to do some backfill with the existing staff that they have in the disease prevention response program, and trying to pull in where they can disease investigators or another nurse, but there's limitations to what activities they can do and with the training. So then they're pulling them from another program.
Just a context question from a commissioner who's never been on the health board, unlike my colleagues, but just looking at the county contribution you show back in 2015, for example, it was 2.5 million. We're talking about 1.375. And I understand there's been changes with state funding, et cetera, but I'm just curious, where do we fit in with like counties of comparable size in terms of the county contribution statewide? Do you have any sense of that? I don't. I'm wondering.
So some of them are set up differently. So we're set up as regional health district. Some are departments within counties. So everyone's a little bit different on
not apples to apples necessarily.
And like King County and
you guys combined as a Seattle King County Health District.
So it's different funding sources than we do.
Well, if that's not a helpful question, I won't go down that road.
Yeah, and then some counties I know aren't contributing anything to health as the state has picked up because of county budgets. They've actually reduced for. So
there are some that
do any of the big cities in King County pay into, or is it all on the county there?
I'm remembering right off
Because years ago we had a pretty robust debate about some of the when we had additional representation from the cities that they may start bringing something to the table, and of course that was just talk.
They're good ideas.
Yeah, exactly. Some of them felt that was more than enough value they brought to the board. But
so pending more info, you guys will be bringing back. Is the board good with us plugging these in as a starting point in the outside agency budget? Seeing head nods around for that. So that is one we'll update the outside agency with this. We'll bring it back for a final, of course, but
and understanding TV.
Yeah. We'll plug these in as are unless we hear something.
Okay, and there's still potential 1 to 2 more grant opportunities that we'll be hearing about, and they both would impact this county ask to bring it down further. So if they're awarded, and we are still awaiting confirmation, but if they're awarded, we may be able to bring that down another 50,000-60,000 and redirect the same staffing we have, but it's being covered by those grants. So there are a couple still in the pipeline that we're awaiting. Great, might be able to make it even better.
This will give us a starting point. I would say.
Thank you for the work you've done on this.
Oh, of course.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And we'll continue to work with Budget and Finance Committee, the boards, for the presentation in September to see if we have that grant award, we can incorporate it for that.
And then we'll know the ask at that point, so. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Appreciate your hard work. I know it's been a lot of work as we've been trying to.
A lot of
get
moving
through it.
parts.
Yes, so appreciate you both. Thank you much.
All right, thank you.
Okay. And that's gonna take us to the medical examiner. We are.
Joel, just ping Gina to see if they're here yet.
Eleven.
11:05 was our
Target.
So the exec was short.
We could.
Oh.
You can look through it quick.
You want me to see if we can do the exec now?
Yeah, good, from now until 11.
It sounds like Dr. Singh has an autopsy right up to 11 o'clock, so 11:05 but
Okay. Yeah, let's do that. Give us reconvene.
That's pretty good.
Are there any, while we're waiting on that, are there any miscellaneous items to come from the board this morning?
So can give a quick update.
Sure.
So we'll have a press release with GSI for State of the County. As a reminder, it's this Thursday, should be out everyone's calendar.
So excited.
Yes. Have we talked about the theme yet, or do we want to reveal that at the end?
Okay.
The theme is leading the way. And so we'll be featuring so many accomplishments from the past year, but we chair selected a few highlights. So look for that. I do anticipate media attendance, and it'd be great for commissioners to be available for interviews afterwards. I anticipate the chair and the sheriff will be back, but to the extent they want to talk to any other commissioners, there's usually good media attendance there as well. Going into the fall, we're still working on some ground field events for the parks. So stay tuned for that. It'll be referenced in State of the County, but it's the latest updates looking like Plants Ferry sometime over the winter, and construction will be complete. It's sounding like on Camas Meadow this fall. But we're still in conversation discussion. Want to touch base with Commissioner French when he's able, but also in talking with the chair for your consideration, we would propose from a communications perspective a ribbon cutting in the spring when the park's going to open, not necessarily at the completion of construction, but most of the park will be complete sometime this fall. So, you know, we'd be doing an event this fall as the weather turns with hydro seed, which probably isn't the best visual, and also not making the park immediately available to the public. So once we get a chance to touch base, you know,
you don't want to encourage people to show up and then tell them, but don't step on the grass. Yeah, so it makes sense. Get it. Yeah,
I'll circle back when we have more details. But that's some great construction photos. It seems like the play equipment and other things are in there, so the project's really coming along nicely. Let's see, there was one more. Oh, the opening of the fair went well. The fair continues to get great media. I know they're anticipating more people through the gate as the smoke is clearing. So if you all have not yet awarded your Commissioner's Choice Award, just a great opportunity with Aaron for some social media. Another point, going back to the state of the county, is we went out and recorded about 7 or 8 different departments who've won awards in the last year as a way to showcase us leading the way. So look forward to that. That's in the editing bay right now, getting worked on. But it's a pretty neat overview. We also have one of our partners, Shrek, to be featured, and some cool things about the Stork pin or the CPR pin. If you aren't familiar with that, at some point getting a tour of Shrek and the 911 center out there, very impressive. And the people who have working there, also very impressive. They got their accreditation in the past year. So that's what the video's highlighting. And then there were 2 staff members there, 2 members of the team who also received awards. So the Stork pin is when they successfully deliver a baby over the phone. You get a Stork pin.
I was gonna say, I've taken a tour. I don't remember hearing about a Stork pin.
The Stork
That's
pin,
cool.
and then the CPR, they have a big jar that fills up with these hearts every time they save a life by successfully doing CPR. They get to put it in there, and then they celebrate when the jar is full. So,
Commissioner French has a comment. Commissioner French?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I had the opportunity to talk to previous Commissioner Kate McCaslin yesterday, who was out at the fair on Friday and yesterday, and reported back that the attendance was extremely low. In fact, her comment was that it's the lowest that she's ever seen. And I'm just wondering, how are we trending? I know Friday, Saturday were bad air days, but are we? I don't know whether people are showing up late and just going to the concerts and stuff, or if there's some other dynamic. But just a report back from somebody that's familiar with the operation of the fair.
We will talk to Erin and get those numbers, because I think we were about the same when I saw her Sunday morning. I think she was saying that we were just a little under last year's numbers for Saturday. I can't remember on Friday. So let's just get the numbers from Erin if we can and report back this afternoon.
I was there Friday night. It did look a little light. I was also there last night. The parking lot was full when I got there. So, I mean, kind of an indication that, well, I assume that that's a good sign, but yet Friday night also the air was pretty bad. I mean, there was a lot of smoke. It was very hazy on Friday. So yeah, Friday might have been down.
I think so. And I think she was anticipating this coming weekend's with the air quality picking up and the cooler weather, still pretty hot.
And also last night being Sunday, there was no grandstand event too. So that also could have maybe been something. So
yeah, and then with regard to Camas Park, I did have dinner last night with some of the leadership at AGC, and I guess last week they came to terms with the Teamsters and are optimistic they'll be able to resolve the other one today. So I know that we were concerned about the union strike, and if they've got that resolved today, does that change your projection with regard to the completion of Camas Park? I thought Doug said that part of the delays were because of the strike.
I think that's accurate. I'll have to touch back with Doug. I heard from Julia, Commissioner French, on Doug's team last week, and I think the completion is still set for this fall. One of the discussion points, and we can connect on offline if you'd like, is whether we want to do the ribbon cutting at the completion of construction or at the opening of the park. Completion is likely to come after the park season has closed this fall. And so one of the conversation points is, do we wait until the spring to do a ribbon cutting when the park is ready to open to accept the public?
Yeah, I would agree with Commissioner Kearns. It's difficult to open up a park and stay off the grass. So maybe the spring opening is a better time to do it. Thank you.
I remembered
I think we, oh, yeah, go ahead, and then we've got Dr. Sands.
Okay. The other two items can wait, so.
No, good, just finish.
Okay. So with State of the County coming up, we're all heads down on that. We did get feedback. Thank you to the commissioners. 3 of the 5 responded on the stabilization center 1-pager and our ability to tell that story in a compelling way. So as soon as we come back with edits to that, we'll get the webpage up. That also invites the question about having a groundbreaking, at least to put a sign up on the property. So we'll touch base with the project team and see what the timing of that is. And then finally, the Winter Ops press conference. Martha Lou had polled you and your assistants for a time that you would be available or who wants to participate this year. I would just recommend the North Side Shop is a great visual. They have a lot of the equipment up there already staged, and I think it helps get the message out. We do want to do it sooner rather than later, early October this year, not knowing when snow's going to fly, and then just wanting to help lead the way, you know, in the region in terms of what our snowplow plan is. So look for that, but looking to target early October. So a few events to update you on. If we can get a response back on that one by like the end of the week, that would be great.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna take us to, I see Dr. Zink has joined us. Thank you. Sorry to, we're ahead of schedule and I know you're busy, so.
Oh, it's fine, yeah. Just trying to juggle some cases this morning with, but I keep an eye on the computer because I know you guys sometimes run ahead or behind, so I'm trying to be alert.
Yes, and I just want to say thank you very much for presenting at the Council of Governments. I think that was really great information. I think everybody really appreciates kind of getting the updated numbers, and so just thank you very much for being able to do that.
Yeah, it was a fun event. Thank you for inviting me, and I was excited to see the ribbon cutting because I've never been to one in real life. Oh. So that was fun.
You can come next year too. If you want.
Thank you. Now I know that it happens, and I met Jack the donkey, so that was also exciting. Yeah. So yes, I'm going to put it on my recurring event calendar.
There you go. I love it.
Yes. In somewhat sadder news, let's talk about budget. So on this first slide here, I just put, I'm not going to read them all out to you, but I just, by way of background, put the RCWs that govern what we do. Basically, all of the duties handled by my office are mandated by state law, and the way in which we do them is outlined in the RCW and the WAC. And so I have the last note there is sort of grayed out, the teaching, training, and community outreach. These things are not required by law. Obviously, I do view them as investments in our future and in the county's future, but they're not required, and we've already started curtailing them, as we'll get to in a minute. I do want to make special note that being accredited by the National Association of Medical Examiners, or NAME, is now required by state law. That's a new law as of January 2025. And that matters because to be fully accredited by NAME, an office is required to have sufficient technical and administrative staff, and insufficient staffing results in a phase 2 deficiency, which is a more serious deficiency for for NAME. And that means that if we get one or more of these phase 2 deficiencies, our accreditation would go into provisional status. And then if those issues aren't corrected, we could potentially lose our accreditation. This slide shows you just the accreditation checklist, and I've outlined in red the requirements for staffing. So next slide. Thanks, Ron. You're right on top of, you're reading my mind. On this slide, I've outlined the 2026 Budget Challenge Medical Examiner Edition. So as you can see, our target budget for 2026 was already $93,624 less than our 2025 budget. And then on top of that, we, like everybody else, have to absorb the salary and benefit increases for next year. And all of that means that effectively our target reduction for 2026 is about $249,760. We already run very lean operationally, and we already have been paying for all of our own travel to trainings and conferences. We did apply for and were awarded a medium-sized grant for toxicology testing, and that'll help offset some of our laboratory costs for next year. But many of our costs are tied to the actual investigation of deaths. So scene responses, body bags, transportation of bodies to our office, autopsy supplies and personal protective equipment, laboratory testing, and so on. So to actually achieve this reduction, we would have to look at cutting staff positions. And so we proposed to eliminate some positions, which I think you've probably seen on the other paperwork, the supplemental budget requests that were submitted. But just to kind of go over where we have been as far as staffing, if we could go to the, so the proposed actions that we would look at would be eliminating our extra help administrative support specialists, not filling a vacant autopsy assistant position, eliminating a deputy medical investigator position, and then reducing our operations manager from one full-time to 80% time. Next slide, please. Just by way of kind of where we've been staffing wise, as some of you already know, we have for several years been kind of adjusting our staffing, fine-tuning our operations in an ongoing effort to be fiscally responsible. This graph is a little bit complex, but basically the blue bars show you our jurisdiction accepted cases. That's a proxy for our caseload. You can see that it's been steadily increasing over the years at a rate of about 10% per year, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little not much less, but sometimes a little more. 2025 numbers do show us on track to continue a 10% increase, and then I've projected the same 10% increase for 2026 just for the sake of looking at where we're going. The gray line shows you our official staff positions that are assigned to the medical examiner office, and the orange line shows what I would call our actual staffing, taking into account the external services that were being paid for out of our budget. So for example, if you look at 2020, we had 14 official positions. We were also paying at that time 2 extra help transcriptionists, a laundry service, and a security service. In 2022, with some grant funding in our possession, we looked at ways that we could use that grant money to invest in some infrastructure to save the county money in the long run. So that year we purchased some laundry machines and transcription software, and we brought those services in-house, which financially meant that we were no longer paying for the outside services, obviously. But on the other hand, it meant that we did start to have to do those tasks. So the pathologists took on transcription work, our autopsy assistants added laundry to their other duties. You can imagine that we do a lot of laundry over here, and some pretty gross laundry at that. We did also eliminate the security service at that time. And we used grant funding to purchase a CT scanner, and that has really been a game changer in terms of supplementing our workforce and allowing us to get by without hiring additional pathologists and autopsy assistants to meet the caseload. That also, though, of course, has added more work to the existing autopsy assistants because they've taken on the task of doing the CT scans, and then the pathologists then read the CT scans. In early 2025, one of our autopsy assistants, sorry, can we go back still, Ron, was accepted into medical school and separated from the county. So I really appreciated the early warning about budget constraints. That meant that with that in mind, we left that position vacant for most of 2025. And over the course of this year, then it's given us the chance to experiment with how best to continue operations in the face of that gap and the anticipated loss of our extra help administrative assistants. The specialized nature of our work means that sharing a position with a different department or using centralized services to get our work done doesn't really make sense for us, which then means that we have to plug our staffing gaps internally. The systems that have worked best for us over the course of the year involve juggling deputy medical investigators around to assist with autopsies as needed, to assist with phone and walk-in traffic as needed, while still keeping them available for their actual investigative work. And that has led to some decreased efficiency in autopsy, some delay in scene responses, but it has been, for the most part, workable. But redistributing and increasing workload over the fewer people has meant that we're stretched so thin by core responsibilities that we don't have the reserve anymore to do the community outreach, and we're limited in our ability to do teaching and training. So we've already suspended our community outreach programs. We've curtailed some of our training and teaching activities. I do want to say that I think these types of programs they're not only important for educating the community about what we do and building a workforce pipeline potentially, but they also let our staff brag a little bit about how cool their jobs are, see how our work impacts the community. I think it's important to provide that to them in what can be really difficult and isolating work. And I think it's the mark of a healthy office to engage in these activities. So to me, there's a flashing indicator here that the fact that we can't do that anymore is an indicator of our operational strain. Relatedly, our ever-rising caseload had already prompted us to become progressively more strict about which cases we investigate, which cases we send an investigator out to, which cases we bring in for autopsy. And now with this year, the more limited staffing, we've really tightened that down even further. The flashing indicator to me here is that we're now at a point of seeing a big increase in the complaints we get from families, from hospitals about the lack of scene response and or the lack of autopsy. We are so far still within the bounds of the RCW and more importantly, within the bounds of medically sound decision making. But I do think that cutting back staff even further will tip us over the line into potentially violating the RCW or the NAME standards. So the bottom line is what I want to express to you this morning is that we can limp along with our cuts to our administrative division. To optimize our operations, we would ideally retain the 4th autopsy assistant position and all 7 deputy medical examiner or deputy medical investigator positions. If that's not possible in the current budget landscape, we can get by with the cuts to autopsy and administration. But in that case, we really do need to retain all 7 of our deputy medical investigator positions. Next slide. So how can we do that? I have a couple of ideas. One is, would there be any way to keep our reimbursements? So my office collects reimbursements from the state of Washington for 30% of each pathologist's salary and 100% of the costs of maternal and infant autopsies. In addition, we do bill outside counties and we recover the costs of conducting autopsies for all of those other counties. And that includes our autopsy supplies, pathologists and autopsy assistant time, and so on. So the funds to pay for these costs obviously come out of the medical examiner budget, but the reimbursements, rather than being used then to repay those costs, bypass our budget and go directly into the general fund. So is there a way to set this up so that some or all of that reimbursement comes back into our budget? Our reimbursement amounts have consistently been over 300,000. Past few years, we've averaged about 391,000 per year, so closer to 400,000. So if those reimbursements can be returned to our budget, that would allow us to offset the projected shortfall and be able to retain our staff. Next slide. If that isn't possible, then I have to ask you for supplemental funds. So my true dream is that you would be able to restore funding for both the autopsy assistant position and the deputy medical examiner position. The total amount of that would be $200,961. I recognize that that might not be realistic in the current budget situation. So my scaled back dream is that you would be able to at least restore full funding for the deputy medical examiner position, and that would be $105,225. I know that that too is a big ask in this where we find ourselves at this point. So I would also like to propose kind of a last-ditch alternate scenario in which I would drop to 80% time. We would use that salary savings then to pay for part of the deputy medical examiner, deputy medical investigator position, and then ask you guys to supplement the balance, which in that scenario would be $34,685. So that's all I have. I appreciate the time, and I wonder if you have any questions for me.
That's a lot.
I did talk fast. I know I threw a lot at you.
Yeah, no, it's good. Questions? I mean, I'm trying to figure out, so the revenues don't go back to them.
You have a chart at some of the beginning that shows the revenues each department brings in, like Auditor Walton brings in tons of money, as you know.
Right, but it's not on a Like,
It's,
so that's.
it's a different type of revenue,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I mean, that's where I'm like, for us to be offering services and we keep asking to make sure that our contracts are covering the cost of those services, it should be going back to cover those costs.
It's your choice, yes.
You know, so it's a different situation than Auditor Dalton's. You know, where it's fees for being asked. So.
You could choose any of these. You could, say the MFM internal autopsies, the outside jurisdictions.
Right.
Kind of should be on both sides of the budget already to make them cost neutral.
Yeah.
I'm just clarifying something. So, just to make sure I'm following, so in order to meet the flat budget, Dr. Singh, you propose basically reducing a number of positions. Are any of those currently filled?
All of them are currently filled except for the autopsy assistant position.
Okay. And then on the deputy medical examiner position, you're saying if we reduce, given the increase in caseload, we might be at risk of being out of compliance with RCW timelines. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, the RCW timelines, like what we can actually investigate, as well as the National Association of Medical Examiner guidelines for retaining certification in terms of what cases we respond to and the timeliness of that.
Okay. And can you, I may have missed this, but were you able to reduce any kind of M&O expenses in your budget specifically? You may have summarized that, but I just couldn't quite hear very clearly.
Right. So a lot of those expenses, unfortunately, are fixed and dependent on our caseload. So most of our EBITDA, aside from maintenance on our X-ray machines, which we do rely on heavily to complete our casework, the rest of it is mostly supplies and body transportation and scene response for our investigators. So we do reimburse their mileage for driving their cars to scenes. But the bulk of our costs are body bags, personal protective equipment, and autopsy supplies. And those are, again, dependent on how many cases we do take in, and that is out of our control for the most part.
I was just gonna say, as I look at the FTE count, I mean, your graph goes to 2020, the spreadsheet we have goes back to 2019. I mean, it does look like the medical, and I did a lot of this before you were here, but I mean, it looks like the medical examiner's office has averaged an additional FTE kind of every year. It's kind of ticked up one FTE each year over the last over the last 6 years. And I know that I think if I remember correctly, I think some of those have been investigators, some of them have been, I mean, it's been a variety of staff, for different positions. Do you see that need slowing up? I mean, I know based on budgets, I mean, you're talking about, I mean, a potential for a reduction here, but I mean, is the need, if money wasn't the issue this year, would you be asking for additional staff again? Like, is the work there?
The work is here, definitely. Yeah, I think we could get by without adding any additional people this year. Potentially next year, depending on kind of how the overdose situation shakes out, if it continues to level off. Our staffing right now is perfectly sized to meet what we have now and adapt to maybe the next year or two. Fielding cuts, though, is where I think we're going to run into trouble in terms of staying within the RCW and the guidelines set out by the National Association of Medical Examiners.
Okay. Can I also ask the outside county, because I know you provide services for how many 20? So like 20 different counties or something. It's a lot for Washington and North Idaho. And are we still confident we're getting full cost recovery on those?
Yes, we would want to reassess that probably the end of this year and make sure that going forward, because a lot of, because of inflation, a lot of the costs of our supplies have gone up. We try to keep a certain amount on hand as kind of a reserve, but as we work through that reserve and have to acquire more supplies, we will want to look at making sure that all of that pencils out in terms of covering the costs.
Okay.
And there's not too many people that do medical examiner duties in the state anymore, correct? I mean, we're one of the few we're the only one in Eastern Washington.
Right, we're the only one in Eastern Washington, and really the only one, practically speaking, that Northern Idaho also has access to. And then all of the other medical examiner offices are on the west side of the state. So yeah, and there is, within that shortage of medical examiner offices, there's also a shortage, as you know, of forensic pathologists. You've heard me talk about that before. So yeah, it's a limited capacity in terms of getting all this work done.
Yeah. Commissioner Walter.
Thanks. So I'm just trying to understand. So as you're providing all those services to those outside counties, what you're saying is the contracts with those counties that pay us back aren't necessarily going into your budget line.
They're not at all going into our budget. Okay. The entirety of that is deposited back into.
Casa can speak to that.
They are all those revenues are assigned to the ME's office budget.
And they're required from accounting principles to be recorded as revenues and not as a credit to an expenditure.
Yeah.
They're not a reimbursement from a full cost recovery perspective. It does need to be recorded.
Yeah,
sorry, can you clarify that then? If like Stevens County, you do some autopsies for Stevens County and they're paying us in their contract, I'm trying to understand, is that going back to pay the costs of the ME's office?
Yes.
If you look in your budgets for the ME's office, you'll see revenues of about $750,000. Some of it is contract services for these other counties, and some of it is intergovernmental revenues, which are reimbursements from the state. So the revenues do get assigned and recognized as revenues in the ME's office. They do not get netted out. It would be inappropriate to net them out with the expenses underneath the expenditure lines.
So is that we are not getting reimbursed at the rate that we should, or what do we need to do to make sure we're capturing those back to Dr. Zing's office and her costs?
They are.
They are capturing them back.
They are capturing back already.
There's just other expenses that make the office more expensive than what.
Okay.
Sorry, I might be confused then. We don't see them, as far as I'm aware, coming back into our budget.
Well, they're not a credit against your expenses. They're actually on a revenue line that makes up part of your budget.
Jeff, why do you think the revenue is going to go?
If you look above the fold, I know on this sheet, look above the fold, you'll see the revenues are up above. Expenses are down below.
That 120 is probably ARP.
Oh, is that? Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. I was looking at the next bit. I'm sorry. Yeah, never mind.
So just to clarify, so Dr. Singh's saying they don't kind of receive those dollars then to spend on to help meet expenses of the budget, but you're saying from the county's perspective, it goes into the general fund and it is part of the dollars that literally help pay what the expenses are, right?
But from their perspective, they're not seeing it.
They don't see it. Yeah. Okay.
But you wouldn't, we wouldn't be doing services for other counties and incurring personnel and costs if we didn't have the revenue offset. We do. As Dr. Singh was saying, they need to go and just make sure that they're doing full cost recovery, and her team does it on a regular basis.
So is it similar to like the detention has different clients that have people in the jail, we charge for them, but that revenue comes back to the general fund to help meet the expense overall?
Like with parks, you'll see here this afternoon, you'll see all the revenues that come in. If that service goes away, then you won't have the expense of it either. So it dropped from both the revenue and the expense.
which is important that we watch for if there is an expected increase in a department's revenue. That could support an increase in the expenses. We want to watch for those things to see where it's happening. Sheriff's Department is one in particular where the Valley added 10 more officers this year. If that's going to be an expense increase, well, there should be a corresponding revenue increase to support that. So it's a somewhat of a net neutral impact.
Net neutral with incorporated share.
Dr. Zane.
Could we then look at the reimbursements for salary? Because we are also not seeing those, and the county is being reimbursed 30% of each pathologist's salary and then being reimbursed for the maternal and child autopsies. So can that at least come back to our budget?
It is today, Dr. Singh. It's a revenue line. If you look in your budget, you'll see the revenue line for intergovernmental revenues for those reimbursements.
So that comes back as money that we can then spend in our budget?
Well, no, it offsets your costs.
It allows us to set your target budget at a level commensurate with that revenue coming in. So it keeps the general fund investment.
Document.
Access to.
I think you guys are going to need to get together and have a conversation for us to get further clear, make sure we, everyone's understanding the budget numbers and what's included and not.
So I think if I'm understanding this correctly, as I'm looking at a spreadsheet, and so revenues from the medical examiner's office are projected for 2026 to be $753,000. And expenses for the medical examiner's office is to be 3.2 million. So that $753,000 will go to cover a portion of that $3.2 million.
The Pend Oreille contract, say it's 100,000 even, went away. You'd have 100,000 less expense.
Yeah.
You'd also have 100,000 less revenue. And so it equals out.
Now, an argument could be there was if revenue was 4 million and we were only, and expenses were 3.2 and we were only covering the 3.2, then the argument could be made. We're sweeping 800,000 to put somewhere else, but the total revenue is less than the expenses. So that revenue is going to cover, all of that revenue is going back in to cover the expenses, but there's still a gap in expenses, and that's being covered some other way through the general fund. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's helpful. Thank you. So what you're saying though, basically, is if we cut back on our outside county work, then that would really have no effect. Like then that would be less.
Charging correctly, you're correct. Yes.
Got it. Okay.
So, as counties have been added over time and more revenue has been added, has the FTE count correspondingly changed to meet that new workload?
Okay. And I don't know, this may be, Dr. Singh, maybe maybe this is something we need legal to look at. Are you able to make a profit on those ME services that you provide for other counties? Are you able to charge more than the cost?
I get 5% more than full cost recovery, kind of like an admin fee.
That's above me. I don't know. I mean, I think we could charge more, but as far as making a profit, that piece I'm not sure about.
Okay.
Yeah, at the very least, we should be not only covering the people and the supplies and services, we should be covering our indirects as well, because all of our internal services support the ME's office, which then in turn supports the other contract companies.
I mean, and it's a facility that was paid for by Spokane County. It's Spokane County staff. I mean, your time is valuable. I mean, if there's a way to
percentage of all the equipment in there.
Yeah. I
So
mean, there's wear and tear.
Sorry, in this last round of adjusting the fees, we have taken into account the amortized cost of using, for example, the CT scanner and the X-ray machine, the cost of supplies and an administrative fee, and the time for the autopsy assistants and whichever pathologist is doing the case. So that has all been folded in. to cover what we projected as the cost is similar to what it would cost Spokane County. So, but the piece to add a piece on for profit, that's the part where I don't know kind of how that part would work.
Commissioner Waldron.
Oh, I was just gonna say that that's an interesting thought, Commissioner Kearns. I mean, it's kind of similar to the health district treatment services program is able to bring in more because they're providing like a clinical service and there's overhead associated. You're allowed to do that, and that's what brings in additional funds beyond the direct cost of care. So anyway, it's just an interesting thought to review and see. But I mean, I'm guessing that, you know, it would adjust the budget by a little bit, but you still have a lot of deaths that you're investigating in Spokane County.
Right.
And that's
the majority of our work is
driving. Right. I mean, that's driving your costs overall is what I'm assuming. So
yeah, that is exactly right. So it's a very small proportion of our total caseload that are from outside the county. Most of it is Spokane County work.
And you have that deputy medical examiner position is filled, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I would hate to, after you took so many years to fill that position, I just would hate to see that get removed from the budget. So I agree with your analysis that one is critical. So I'd like to continue the conversation on that because, I mean, basically you and this person are the ultimate people that have to sign off, right? In terms of meeting all of the legal and RCW requirements. So anyway, those are just my thoughts.
Question. Dr. Singh, I'm looking at the overtime number, and it looks like you're hoping or budgeting for lower overtime next year. And I'm looking at the 2025 last, or 24 was 25,000 budgeted, next year for 8. So I'm just wondering kind of how you're doing this year with it. And then I'm just looking at your caseloads going up and up and, you know, worrying on your behalf. It just seems like a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been working really hard. We changed the investigator schedule so that there's more overlap so that people aren't having to take cases right at the end of their shifts, leading to overtime. But you know, there are days when all of the investigators are just going from scene to scene to scene, and some of that is inevitable. And that's another reason why I think it's crucial to keep all 7, because if we only have 6 investigators covering even more cases, then that's going to lead to more overtime, which I don't think will save us money in the long run. So,
how are you doing this year on overtime versus your budget?
I believe we're just right at the budget or slightly under now in September. So we're gonna try to be even more tight with it, but again, some of it is unavoidable, unfortunately. But optimistically, we did cut that back for next year.
Yeah. So I think what we need to see is just budget office if you get together to make sure everyone's on the same page with the revenues and expenditures, and then really just get a quick update. Okay, thank you very much. If we, just so you know, we're not making decisions today on additional costs, so so we will take all this into consideration as we move forward with the budget.
Okay, great, that's all I can ask. Thank you all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, then that takes us to a recap you want to do, or
I don't think we probably have a recap
today. This morning, not yet.
We might this afternoon if we get all these put onto the spreadsheet just to make sure you guys agree that we have everything from the morning factored correctly.
Okay. And then the second we have parks and planning.
The parks and planning will start at 1 o'clock today. I think most of them, 1:30, I'm sorry. I think most of them will probably go close to an hour. They're bigger, more complex departments. I think maybe more questions, we'll probably use that full time.
Great. So then we've got the executive session. Was there any other miscellaneous?
I was just gonna so I wasn't sure about the process. It was mentioned earlier about the Commissioner's Choice Awards for the fair. Aaron has the ribbons, so you gotta set up a time, pick it up from Aaron, if you didn't pick it up on Friday at the ribbon cutting, and then, but she has the actual physical ribbons to hand out, so.
She's gonna be presenting mine because mine doesn't open quite yet.
Oh, okay,
So, yes, where my ribbon's gonna go.
awesome.
Breaking news here, so I'll ask you what it is. Gotta keep the anticipation building.
Exactly.
I handed mine out last night.
Did you?
What'd you do?
It's not Facebook official yet, guys.
Oh, sorry. Okay, that's fair.
Slow down.
Firing
Yeah,
lines.
it'll be, come on,
I
no.
got lots of constituents asking me.
I've seen you like my Facebook posts, so I know you follow my page. Just
Waiting with bated breath.
we'll see.
Okay. Okay. Anything else before we go into executive session?
We have
Gonna state the
two
purpose.
executive sessions today. We had a quick add-on, total time 25 minutes. They're both pending in potential litigation, no action out of either of them. The first one, 15 minutes with Matt Folsom, Scott Simmons, Devin Curda, Jeff McMorris, Mike Barber, Ashley Cloud, Pat Bell, Derek Bryan, and John Justice.
Anyway, not in it.
They burrowed into some blankets and other
Yeah.
stuff, so.
The biggest thing we found, because we used to have a bunny, it was they get to keep cords and stuff up.